Hi, I'm Justin Smith, and you're on the record with the News Reporter. My guest today is Gary Lanier. Gary is Columbus County's Economic Development and Planning Director. Gary, I appreciate you being here.
Oh, glad to be here. Hope I can share a little information to the public.
So, speaking of the public, one of the hot topics in Columbus County in the past couple years has been housing developments. And specifically, we've seen some housing developments pop up and show interest down in the southern part of the county, closer to Myrtle Beach. Will you talk through some of the interest that we've seen and just some of the developments that we've already had located in Columbus County?
Be glad to. It really all started a number of years ago when we worked out an arrangement with Grand Strand Sewer to bring a sewer line all the way across the bottom corner of the county to serve Old Dock School. We had an old septic system for that school. It was failing and it was costing the school system a ton of money to maintain. And Grand Strand said, well, if you will bring a water line to the school so we know how much water is being used and we know what to charge for sewer, then we will bring a sewer line to the school.
So Columbus County government took the water line, Grand Strand brought the sewer line, and so that sewer line from Horry County, that is what has led to a lot of this growth?
That's it. Sewer is the golden key because a lot of our land, as everyone knows, is sometimes wet, sometimes doesn't drain real well, sometimes will not perk, as they say, for a septic system. And in those kinds of situations, a sewer system, a public sewer system, creates a situation where it doesn't matter whether land will or will not perk, it can be used for housing developments.
So the sewer is important in attracting housing developments, but how about that location, that part of the county where it's, 15, 20 minutes from Myrtle Beach?
I think that certainly is a draw, but we needed more housing, affordable housing, and we knew that Horry County was becoming, they're packed in Horry County. Anybody that's been down to Myrtle Beach, and our commissioners have always been real adamant about we don't want to be another Myrtle Beach so that's why we have developed a planned unit development zoning district set up so that our commissioners can say whether or not you can have a big development literally right next door to another development and so forth. We can kind of create a situation where we hope to spread out the population we know is coming. But we're dealing with, we've already had McGill Meadows approved. Cottonwood Place is already just about built out.
And can you put some numbers on these projects in terms of approximate number of houses?
Yeah, Cottonwood's a couple of hundred. McGill Meadows will be about 625, 630. It was going to be over 700, but they changed up and took out some duplexes and put single. You'd have to have two different land uses. It can't be, everything cannot, in one of these developments, can't just be single-family detached housing. Has to be something else. Now that something else, that second land use, could be commercial. And that's what's happening in the case of McGill Meadows, which is right on Seven Creeks Highway just before you get into South Carolina.
So when we say commercial, what types of businesses might locate there?
Well, if you have 600 homes, that's 600 homes times 2.5 people per home. That's 1,200, 13, 14, 1,500 people that need a haircut once a month, or need to go to the dentist every 6 months, or may have medical issues that they don't want to drive 30 minutes to get to a doctor's office for a regular checkup if they're dealing with high blood pressure. Anytime you have a group of people living in close proximity, you need these services. There's been some discussion with what we call the Grag Tract. That's the big one that's close to McGill Meadows. It's over 3,000 acres that will be developed. It will literally have a 4-lane boulevard going through the middle of it, like Brunswick Forest has down in Brunswick County. That's the biggie that's coming. But when you have that many people, that development will have 10 or 12,000 homes. You're going to see a grocery store down there. You're going to see gas stations. You're going to see restaurants. You're going to see the service industries, the barbers, the hairdressers, the nail some people want that nail polish stuff. So these are the kinds of support services that any development will naturally draw as a result.
Well, and I think naturally draw, that's an important phrase, right? Because county government is not providing any kind of incentives or anything to attract businesses to that part of the county. The logic is that those businesses will find that there is a demand for their service and they will just open up shop down there.
It's kind of like that Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. If you build a lot of homes, the services, the support type businesses will come.
So let's talk about the pros and the cons maybe of housing developments. Let's start with the pros, okay? So jobs, right, at those businesses potentially.
Yeah, you've got jobs at the businesses. It's also, from an economic development standpoint, an effective recruiting tool to be able to show that your county is growing. With site selectors and with companies that hire those site selectors, their primary focus is lowering risk. And one of the biggest risks in today's situation that we're all dealing with is, can I get people?
Employees.
Employees.
If you're a large manufacturer, a large employer.
You're not going to bring a company that needs 250 or 300 employees into an area that's actually seeing a decline in their population, while at the same time the average age of the population is going up. They know that's just not a winning equation. So when you bring in new housing, what follows, and I found this interesting, but a developer shared this with me, says, yes, a lot of the houses will be sold to retired people. But what happens is mom and dad retire to southeastern Columbus County, and then the kids and the grandkids come to visit. And then they see what kind of quality of life we have here. They look at mom and dad's electric bill, and it's $130, and the bill they just paid up north might be $500. And they start looking for work in this area because they see that it will improve their quality of life. Plus they get to be close to the grandkids, get to be close to the grandparents, the kids get to be close to the parents. And so what the second wave that comes in and starts buying homes are the working age people and their kids that come down because grandma and grandpa kind of set the stage or broke trail, as they used to say in the trapper days,
Yeah.
And
so there are those obvious advantages then, or benefits of housing development in terms of business growth and having a workforce to attract business. However, we have had Columbus County residents kind of push back a little bit and question housing growth. And part of that is, down in that part of the county, Dothan, Olympic, Pireway, there are people who their families have been down there for generations. They're accustomed to it being rural, tranquil, and there's apprehension among some people. The idea of having a boulevard, as you say, like Brunswick Forest. So how do you respond to those concerns, and how does the county, from a policy standpoint, respond to those concerns?
Well, we made sure when we put our planned unit development zoning district ordinance in place that the absolute first step is for the developer to hold a public information meeting to share with the neighbors are we planning to do. Ask the neighbors, what are your concerns? And I think McGill Meadows is a really good example of how that can result in a kind of a little bit of a meeting in the middle. There's always going to be the folks the not in my backyard folks that don't want anything to change. But you know what else they don't want ever to change? They don't want to see their property tax bill change either. But the price of gas for our sheriff's cars, the price of the sheriff's cars, the salaries for the sheriff's officers, the deputies, everything goes up. Inflation is real. And if nothing changes, if you don't add to the tax base, the taxes are going to go up. But if you do grow and you grow in a smart and cooperative manner, you can keep taxes at a reasonable level but also add to your tax base. Now, in the case of McGill Meadows, a big concern in the Olympic area was flooding. Every time it rains, people on Seven Creeks Highway, their front yards, I saw the pictures, were covered in water. The drainage was horrible. And their big concern was if 600, 700 houses go in across the road, is that just not going to make it even worse? Because now you don't have all those woods to soak up the rainwater.
Right, where's the water going to go? Yeah.
So the developers agreed to buy an easement and dig a drainage canal all the way to the Waccamaw River Swamp and channel, even though state law requires that their design of the development has to retain I think it's a 10-year rain event. So that's pretty good hard rain, but it's not a tropical storm kind of level rain, which we know we all see here usually 2 or 3 times a year, if not a hurricane. So what was agreed to, and that drainage canal and that right-of-way is to be maintained into perpetuity by the Homeowners Association for the McGill Meadows development. So that told all of the neighbors up and down Seven Creeks Highway that if there's an excess water, they will probably get less flooding in their front yards than they do now because of the drainage improvements that the developer agreed to take on as part of their development project.
And let's stick on infrastructure for a second, because I do think that's one of the questions or maybe misconceptions that sometimes people have is they're thinking, okay, are we, the longtime taxpayers of Columbus County, footing the bill to improve the infrastructure needed for these developments? But I think at least in the case of the water district down there, there's been a policy put in place where essentially that cost is being passed on to these developers. Is that right?
It's not just a policy, it is state law. There is a general statute that requires for these kinds of situations that a system development fee be put together and documented by either a licensed professional engineer in the state of North Carolina or a certified public accountant. We went through that whole process of what will the demand for water do to water district, that water district, right? So we know we're going to have an elevated water storage tank. That's $6 a gallon. You put a 500,000 gallon tank in the air, you're talking about $6 million. That's not going to be, that cost is not going to be borne by the people that are taxpayers in that water district. It's going to be borne by the new hookups to water in that district. So when all these new houses are built, I think the number's coming out to like $2,620 some bucks or something in that range. So every time a new house is built and a water meter is set, they're going to pay that $2,600 plus the tap fee for the meter. which might total altogether $4,000. But that $4,000 times 10 or 12, 14,000 homes over time, over the next 6 to 7 years, 10 years even, that's going to pay for the infrastructure. It's not, that cost is not going to be expected to be borne by our existing citizens and taxpayers. That's not, water districts have to pay for themselves. They're an enterprise account. We do not use property tax money to do infrastructure. The infrastructure water system has to pay for itself. And so that's why you develop this, and we're required by state law, the general statute that covers this, to review that system development fee every 5 years at a minimum. So that if things are growing faster and you're gonna, you may change the number. If they're growing slower on the build out than expected, that means that the infrastructure had to be put in place, but now it's gonna take longer to pay for it. That's more interest. The next group of people to hook up are going to pay, instead of $2,630, they may pay $2,460.
And these are the new
hookups.
Homeowners. So I think that's one of the misconceptions that I've heard. Are there other misconceptions when it comes to housing developments that you have heard that you want to try to address?
I've had a number of discussions with people who have concerns, and I have advised them that when you come to the public hearings before the planning board, or you go to the information meeting with the developer, don't just go there with your concerns and your I don't want it. If you've got a reasonable concern, offer a reasonable compromise. There's nothing wrong with that. These developers want to develop the land. And just like the compromise that was made on the drainage with the McGill Meadows project, that doesn't mean other compromises cannot also be made for instance, I don't know, I could make stuff up, but say there's a housing development, for maybe adjacent landowners get to use the pool in the development. I don't know. It's whatever the public in the area, adjacent landowners and the developer agree to, that can be done. Anything can be negotiated, but people need to be reasonable. For instance, we have as a standard rule is a 30-foot vegetative buffer around the entire development. You can't go when there's nothing behind the development but woods, and but you own those woods. You can't expect to come to a public hearing and demand that the developer on their land have a 50 or a 75 or a 100-foot buffer, because that's now land that they have to pay for, but you're telling them, you're expecting them to not do anything with it. A 30-foot buffer is pretty standard across the state of North Carolina with developments. Now, are there other things that you can make sure about those buffers that are met? Yes, that's where bring a solution to a concern with you. Don't just bring the concern, and do a little homework. Be able to offer up a solution and offer up what you have determined it may cost the developer, so that when the planning board hears it or our board of commissioners hear it, they have a choice. They can accept as presented. They can accept contingent upon the following conditions being met, or they can say, no, we're not going to approve it. So there's always room for flexibility and for a developer to work together with the community, so that, like any negotiation, the best negotiation is when both parties go away having got something that they want, but that neither party has got everything they want, because that's the nature of a fair and reasonable negotiation.
So we could go on for a while with this, but for the purposes of today's conversation, as we wrap up, most of my questions have been about county government's role in approving housing developments. But can you talk about high level other hoops that developers have to jump through, either with the state, regulatory bodies, maybe environmental or utilities, transportation? What's the overview of some of the other things that they have to do?
They have to, one of the big things is traffic. Everybody worries about traffic. A good example is the Antioch Church Road development here a while back. Everybody talked about you put 38 houses in, all that traffic on Antioch Church Road. Well, traffic study showed that there was 1,200 cars went down Antioch Church Road every day. That road, as a two-lane highway, is designed by DOT to handle 15,000 cars a day. 38 homes is not going to bump 1,200 per day up to 15,000.
But so DOT has to review the
They've
effects?
got to. We have
Okay.
a technical review committee for any of these developments. DOT is right there as member of our technical review committee. The county fire marshal's office is part of that technical review committee. They make sure that primary roads going into that development meet minimum width standards, that they have turnarounds that are a minimum diameter if it's a cul-de-sac, so that our emergency vehicles, our fire trucks can get in, turn around, and get back out. And all of these state rules and regulations have to be met during the whole build out in the initial design and approval process of what we call the preliminary plats and the final plats. And it's only after those final plats have been approved for each phase of the development that you can actually pull building permits. So there's a lot that goes into, a lot of hoops that have to be jumped through that the general public doesn't even know about, never sees, maybe never even hears about. But it doesn't mean that, I mean, the state there's a lot of really smart people that work for a lot of years to develop certain standards for housing developments, for fire safety, for highway use and loading. For instance, a big development, DOT may say right off the bat, you cannot have your turnout to go into your development right off a two-lane highway. You're going to have to allow land for a deceleration lane, and we're going to let you turn in a right turn to go in. When you come out, we're not going to let you go across the busy highway like Seven Creeks. You're going to have to turn right going out, and maybe you go down and there's got to be a Michigan, I think they call them Michigan turns. Mm-hmm. You're seeing them go in everywhere, where you have to now get over and then turn if you want to go back the other way. You're not going to cut back and try to cross a busy traffic road. So there's all kinds of standards that have to be met. Traffic studies have to be done, and all of the results of those studies shared with DOT, and then DOT will tell the developer, okay, you're okay with the way things are for the first 150 homes. But once you go over 150, you've got to put in that deceleration lane. So they don't make them do it right up front, but as the build out for the development goes forward and it reaches a certain point, they're going to have to make certain investments in the road structure, and DOT isn't going to pay for that. That's the developer's cost. It's not Columbus County. We don't do anything with roads. We don't repair them. We don't buy them. We don't fix them. It's all on the developer, and that's why even with unplanned unit development type situations, from a planning and zoning standpoint now, I tell people if you don't have some kind of a road maintenance agreement, I will not sign off on the plat for you to put 15 houses in. I don't care, because we see too many people go to the county commissioners complaining about the condition of the roads in their neighborhood, and there never was any kind of covenants put in place, no road maintenance agreement, no homeowners association. You don't have to have a homeowners association, but you can have a road maintenance agreement that's attached to each deed, so that everybody in there knows they have to put so much into a fund so that when the potholes start showing up in 12 years, they can be fixed.
So we've given people kind of the Reader's Digest version of housing development. If people are interested in learning more, they can obviously attend a planning board meeting or a county commissioner meeting. Are there other things that you would suggest to help get people up to speed?
That's a good question. Don't just look here, look in Brunswick County, look in Horry County, if you have an opportunity, see what's going on around you. Because we all learn from one another, and we're a rural county that's starting to feel some growing pains. Horry County and Brunswick County and New Hanover County, they have just dealt with growing pains. They done been in the hospital and gone through surgery. They've dealt with it now to the point that they pretty much have things figured out. So whenever a question arises, I do not hesitate to pick up the phone and call West McLeod down at the Cape Fear Council of Governments and ask, hey, how do you think we should handle this situation? Or this question has come up. We haven't had to deal with it with one of our developments yet. What have you seen done in the area? And so look around at how things are done and what's been done well and what maybe hasn't been done so well when you're driving around in and around the beach. And remember those things so that when you're faced with a development coming in a section of the county that you're living in, you can raise those questions about, I see down at Brunswick Forest where they had to do this. Are you going to do that as well so that you don't have this issue come up with residents?
Yeah.
Those kind of questions, being an informed citizenry, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the best way to avoid problems.
Absolutely, and that's the whole purpose of this show. And Gary, thank you so much for joining us today. And we certainly will be continuing to watch housing development in Columbus County for years to come. Thank you for watching On the Record. Please join us back here soon for the next episode.